In the very beginning there was a plan, a grand design. God fashioned a place of unparalleled beauty. This place was called the Garden of Eden. Imagine a world bursting with life. Flowers bloomed in every color imaginable. Trees stood tall, their branches heavy with juicy fruits. Rivers flowed with clear, cool water. Birds sang sweet melodies, filling the air with joy. It was a sanctuary, a perfect home, crafted with love and care. This garden was a testament to life itself, a vibrant tapestry of creation. Into this paradise, God introduced the first humans. Adam was formed from the dust of the earth. Eve was created from Adam's side, a companion. They lived in this garden, a place of pure innocence. Their days were filled with wonder and delight. They explored the lush landscapes together. They walked among the animals, speaking with them freely. There was no fear, no worry, only peace. They rested under the magnificent trees, feeling the warmth of God's presence. It was a life of simple joy, a continuous day of play. Their existence was idyllic, a never-ending day of play and joy, as some might describe it. Imagine waking each day to perfect harmony. The sun always seemed to shine just right. The breeze was always gentle. Adam and Eve had everything they needed. They were content, living in close communion with their Creator. Their hearts were light, their spirits free. The garden provided for them abundantly. They were stewards of this beautiful creation, living in blissful ignorance of anything beyond its perfect borders. Among all the wonders of Eden, one tree was unique. It stood apart, holding a special significance. This was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God, in His wisdom, set a boundary. He gave Adam and Eve a single, clear instruction. "You may eat from any tree in the garden," He said, "but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat." This was the only rule, a test of their obedience and trust. The tree represented a path they were not yet meant to walk. Then, one day, a new voice entered the garden. It belonged to a serpent. This was no ordinary creature. It was described as sneaky, subtle, and cunning. The serpent observed Eve. It saw her natural curiosity, her openness to the world around her. It approached her when she was alone, perhaps near the forbidden tree. The serpent was a master of suggestion, its words like a gentle breeze that could steer a mighty ship off course. It began to plant a seed of doubt, a question about God's intentions and His command. The serpent whispered a tempting thought to Eve. It spoke of the forbidden fruit. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" it asked, feigning innocence. Then, it offered a different perspective on God's rule. It suggested that God was withholding something wonderful. "If you eat this fruit," the serpent hissed, "your eyes will be opened. You will be as wise as God. You will know the difference between good and evil." This promise of hidden knowledge, of elevated understanding, was powerful and alluring. Eve listened. The fruit itself looked so appealing, so delicious. The serpent's words made the desire for wisdom too enticing. She stood before the tree, the serpent's seductive promise echoing in her mind. The allure of knowing what God knew, of seeing the world in a new light, was a strong pull. She considered the fruit, its beauty, and the potential it held. The simple life of innocence was now contrasted with the tantalizing prospect of profound insight. A choice had to be made, a pivotal moment in the garden. And so, Eve reached out, took a bite of the forbidden fruit. The taste perhaps was sweet, but the act itself was one of disobedience. She had crossed the line God had drawn. Her decision was not made in isolation. She then found Adam and gave some of the fruit to him. Adam, too, also ate. Together, they partook in what was forbidden. The choice was made not just by one, but by both. The serpent's mission was accomplished. The perfect harmony of Eden was about to be irrevocably shattered. The moment Adam and Eve tasted the fruit, something changed. It was profound. Their eyes were opened, just as the serpent had promised. But it was not in the way they hadn't expected. They did not suddenly feel godlike. Instead, they saw things differently. The world around them, once a source of pure joy, now seemed altered. The innocence that had shielded them was gone. They perceived themselves and their surroundings with a new, unsettling clarity. This was the dawn of a different kind underscore awareness. For the first time, they experienced emotions previously unknown to them. Fear and shame washed over them. They looked at their own nakedness and felt exposed, vulnerable. This was a stark contrast to their previous carefree existence. The garden's bliss had ended. The realization of their disobedience brought with it a heavy burden. They knew they had broken God's trust, their one simple rule. The joy was replaced by anxiety, the peace by a gnawing disquiet. They tried to hide, to cover their newfound shame. When God walked in the garden in the cool of the day, he called out to Adam. He knew what had happened. God was deeply saddened by their disobedience. Imagine the sorrow of a creator seeing his beloved creations turn away from his guidance. It was not anger alone, but a profound disappointment. The bond of trust had been broken. The consequences of their choice were now inevitable. The open communication they once shared with God was now strained, filled with the weight of their actions. The consequence was clear and severe. They could no longer remain in Eden. The garden, their perfect home, was now lost to them. Leaving was hard. It was an expulsion from paradise, a journey into an unknown world. The gates closed behind them, guarded by cherubim and a flaming sword. This was to prevent them from returning, from reaching out to the tree of life in their fallen state. Their life of effortless abundance was over. The age of innocence had passed. Outside the pristine walls of Eden, life was harsh. The world they entered was rugged, untamed. It was a stark contrast to the gentle, nurturing environment of the garden. Suddenly, survival was a daily concern. Adam and Eve had to learn everything from scratch. They needed to figure out how to grow food from the resistant soil. They had to build shelter to protect themselves from the elements. The ground would now yield its bounty only through toil and sweat. Every day presented new challenges. In this new, challenging life, Adam and Eve experienced the full spectrum of life. It was no longer just unending joy. They encountered joyful discoveries, yes, but also deep struggle. They knew sorrow and tasted failure. But they also found moments of success and learned the true meaning of survival. They experienced the cycle of birth, as they had children, and eventually, they would also face death. This was the reality of the world outside paradise, a world of contrasts and complexities. Adam and Eve became parents, raising children who would go on to have their own families. Their descendants began spreading across the land. They were the progenitors of humanity, carrying with them the story of Eden, a memory of what was lost and the lessons learned from their choices. They passed on the skills of survival, but also the stories of their origin, of God, and of the garden. Humanity's journey began in earnest, marked by both the burden of the fall and the potential for growth. Through their journey and the many challenges they faced, Adam and Eve discovered their own strength and resilience. They learned to adapt to their new world. They learned to love more deeply perhaps, and to cherish fleeting moments of happiness and peace. Crucially, they taught their children stories of the importance of making choices and living with the consequences of their actions. Their story became a foundational narrative, a reminder that choices have power, and that even in hardship, humanity can endure and find meaning.